Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Voris. Archbishop Fulton Sheen. Fulton Sheen. Why has he not yet been declared a saint? What's going on with his canonization process? It seems like the U.S. hierarchy is kind of intent on just dragging this out and preventing an official canonization from happening. It at least seems that way. That question is certainly out there. So we've invited on Dr. Peter Howard. He is a leading expert on the teachings of Venerable Fulton J. Sheen, and he is the founder and president of the Fulton Sheen Institute, which is headquartered in Sandpoint, Idaho, where it exists to continue the implementation of Sheen's mission and his teachings. Dr. Howard is the author of the book, The Woman, Mary as Mediatrix in the Teaching of Fulton J. Sheen, the authoritative book on Sheen's Mariology, and he's traveled internationally, helping others discover this future saint and advancing his cause. Doctor, thank you very much for being on with us. Greatly appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you, Michael. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, it's first of all, thank you for the work you're doing on behalf of Bishop Sheen. We actually have our studio here named after Bishop Sheen. Had a great fondness for him as a kid because he, on the question of Mary, as a matter of fact, helped bring my father into the faith. My dad, even as a Protestant, used to watch Sheen's show in the 1950s, and he was a great devotee of Bishop Sheen, and I always personally recommend to everybody when they say, what book can I read? I said, well, outside the Gospels, read The Life of Christ by Sheen, and it's tremendous. So you have a very warm audience here in the form of your interviewer, so there won't be any hardball questions. So this is more of a fanboy thing. Thank you very much for your work on behalf of his cause for sainthood. Let's start with that if we can right now. So I think a lot of people are like, how come this just sort of paused? It's the reason given is that the Congregation for Saints in Rome got letters from, I believe it was Cardinal Dolan and Cardinal Supich, asking them to stop the cause of canonization at the request of Rochester Bishop Matano because of like all the sex abuse stuff going on with the investigation in the state of New York. It seems like, I don't know, something seems fishy there, but is there anything you can tell us and enlighten us about, first of all, the cause and its delay and its constant delays?
Well, first, thank you, Michael, and everybody at Church Militant, too, because you guys really have been the tip of the spear covering these things when hardly anybody really was. I mean, I think you were the only ones there when the transfer of the body was taking place, and just giving people good insights as far as what is going on. I mean, to the extent that we can know that. The cause itself is interesting because it's like, I like to tell people the cause is essentially concluded, because the only thing that's separating us calling him Venerable Fulton Sheen and Blessed Fulton Sheen is a ceremonial mass in which it's declared. Behind the scenes, going all the way back to July 5th of 2019, right after the miracle was approved of James Fulton Engstrom, it was really, at that point, Pope Francis putting a stamp of approval on it, saying, okay, we can now set the date of the Mass, and he'll be declared blessed. So you could kind of say, like, it's about as close as calling him blessed as you possibly can, but this necessary formality and things has been, like you said, unduly delayed, and the excuses that were given, they don't exist anymore, because this investigation has been long concluded, and they haven't found anything. And there's a lot of questions that go into it because Rome has already done this, so it's right. Like shedding light, like who's leading whom in all of this. It's an investigation where the church doesn't leave any stone unturned. And right. So we're kind of just at this point. And I know that there's been some recent communications with Rochester, and they've come back basically saying, we remain unchanged from our 2019 statement. which didn't really say much.
Yeah.
We want this to be a positive experience when we celebrate this, with no kind of dubious atmosphere. When they're the ones who have created it,
right.
and they're saying, "Well, we will abide." This was their words. We will abide by what Rome tells us to do. But Rome's most likely not going to do anything until Rochester tells Rome what to do in this regard. So it's just, I love your opening with the Vortex, because it's round and round we go
yes.
on this issue.
Yeah.
And it seems by design that this is not to be, something that's going to be concluded anytime soon.
Yeah, just for the public to understand, the process. Can you walk us through just what the process is for canonization? To actually, and what does it mean? It doesn't mean that you're not in heaven until the person we're talking about is not in heaven until the church declares them. It's actually the other way around. The church declares that somebody is in heaven once there's certitude they're already there for and that certitude comes from not only sort of a human investigation of the person's life and all this and everything. It also comes from attribution of miracles to them. The fact that somebody hasn't risen from servant of God or to the next step up, which is venerable, which is where Bishop Sheen is right now, to blessed, which is one step below saint. What you get from being declared a saint is a universal feast day. You are included in the canon, the list. That's where the term canonization comes from. You are included in the canon of saints. You are mentioned by name in Mass on your feast days. None of the absence of any of that doesn't mean you're not in heaven yet. It just means the church on earth, the church militant, ostensibly hasn't concluded its work to verify something of the church triumphant. That's really all it means. But down here, I don't think many people will be surprised to learn that sometimes these things get rife with politics and various, the process can become muddied. And that certainly seems to be what the case is here with Bishop Sheen. Could you walk us through the miracle that you talked about? Mm-hmm. What happened in that case? And do we have any idea why? We've speculated here at Church Militant as to why many of the U.S. bishops don't want Bishop Sheen being held up as a model for a bishop and a saint, but you do this every day. So can you walk us through what's the miracle? Sure. What do you think the politics are at play? All of that.
Well, the miracle deals with a family in Peoria, Illinois. This goes all the way back to, I believe, 2010. And now James Fulton Engstrom, when he was born without a heartbeat, and he didn't have a pulse or heartbeat for 61 minutes. And of course, what physician wouldn't be sitting there like saying, he's dead, and this is not coming around. And then it was during this time where they turned to Fulton Sheen. And it was a priest also who was encouraging that. And in this praying for Fulton Sheen, literally at the 61st minute, he came out of it. He woke up, and it was like a resurrection experience. And from that point onward, not only did he survive, there were no side effects from hypoxia, not having enough oxygen, and to this day, he's a growing, healthy boy. And so,
well, he'd be in like middle school or maybe even freshman in high school at this point, right?
Right. He would be, I think he's 13 or 14 right now.
Right.
So, yeah. So it's interesting.
No side effects, no physical damage, no mental damage, nothing. He's born with 0 heartbeat, which means no oxygen, etc. And here he is today. Where did Bishop Sheen come into the picture on this?
Well, it was, they knew of Fulton Sheen ahead of time, and they had a love for him. But this moment was one where it was really like an inspired moment. They all felt led to pray and cry out to Fulton Sheen, literally for a miracle to save their son's life. And it was when they did that, and not long after, that little James Fulton woke up. and or whatever.
Let me interrupt you and get the timing on that to the degree that you know it. I was kind of like establishing all the who, what, where, when, whys of everything on something like this. So the little boy is born with no heartbeat, etc. A period of time goes by, and then when they begin, a longer period of time in that 61 minutes, and then when they begin praying to Bishop Sheen, the parents, the family, that's when the little boy revives and everything is fine? Or had they been praying almost that whole hour, and at the end of that is when it happened? Or do you know?
I don't know for sure if it was the entire hour. I know that as things became more dire in the reality of it doesn't look like he's going to be alive. I mean, when you don't have a heartbeat and you have no pulse, I mean, you're dead. I mean, clinically speaking, you're dead. And so, but I don't know exactly. I don't think it was like at the first moment they did, and then it happened. They started praying more and more. I would probably say in the latter half of that time, and then all of a sudden it was, they transported. I mean, it was amazing just how, how I think the not the hysteria, but it was a relatively calm, and it was just a powerful moment when the Holy Spirit came in and led them in this direction. There was this confidence that entered in, and next thing you know, you have this, I mean, literally a resurrection. And that was they didn't cry out to various saints like we might all, like who's, anyone who will take this miracle, please grab it. It was directly to Fulton Sheen. And then there we go. Had the little boy been declared dead? Did they call it? Did the doctors call it? Or was it just everybody just kind of understood he's dead, or he's in a condition where he's approaching death? Because what I'm trying to get at is, this is probably a fumbly way to ask the question, but was the boy dead and resurrected, or had he not been, I mean, I say dead, I mean officially dead, as in the doctors in the hospital had called it the time of death? Or was it a case of, well, we just don't want to do that, it's kind of inappropriate, he's just been born, let's treat this a little more gingerly? Do we know the details of that? I actually don't remember all of those details, other than when I've spoken to Bonnie Engstrom, she's the mother, that there was this clear understanding that their baby was dead, and just time went on, and I mean, I guess an hour can be like an eternity in that situation, but it's within that time and the movement around, it was I wish I had more of the details. I know she wrote a book, and I kind of skimmed through it a little bit. It's called was it 61-Minute Miracle, dedicated to Fulton, to the whole story. Sure. But I don't know if the doctors actually declared a time of death, because I think that would have basically, they all would have walked away. Sure. That's kind of how that works. I mean, when my father died, that's kind of what they did, and we had a closing moment, and then we left the room. Right. But have to get Bonnie on, retell the story. Sure. Yeah, well, in either case, it's it's the miracle that the church attributes to Bishop Sheen. Let's move into the, shall we say, the more natural as opposed to supernatural aspect of Bishop Sheen's canonization cause here. What's going on? What's the official excuse, and I'm just going to call it excuse, from Bishop Matano, who blessedly, I believe, is supposed to retire in the next few months, I think. Perhaps getting him out of there will get another bishop in there, who knows. But he's certainly been the roadblock so far. What is going on with him and his pointing to the New York State Attorney General's office as like, well, until they clear him, we can't. That seems to me be a very dangerous precedent for the church to go along with. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you guys did a really good, I think, investigation of that earlier. It really, there were other characters obviously influencing Bishop Matano to do this, because it came out of nowhere. The timing of this it's so suspect after the quick movement of after the miracle to then the declaration of that July of 2019, and then I mean Peoria had put everything into getting this mass set up, all the media. I mean, so much money went into this, and then this happens. So it's like there better be a darn good, hard fact reason for this. But the real story is there was none. It was. It totally sounds like a movie script. Like behind the scenes, right. Conversations are taking place, and Bishop Matano, as the Bishop of Rochester, is going to be the one who's used ultimately to make this communication to Rome, with the recommendation that it be postponed, and all of it in light of this Attorney General report that was underway, just like they've done in Pennsylvania and Ohio, and I think some other states are having it go, where they've looked at
Illinois just released theirs today, the day we're shooting this. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, there you go.
Right.
And so, it all had to do with, well, how did bishops deal with any sexual abuse allegations? Well, Rome knew of these because people were talking about, well, there's 2 cases that might be questionable with Sheen. Well, Rome knew what those were, and they were already thoroughly investigated, and Sheen came out clean on those. Mm-hmm. And he was only there for 3 years, 66 to 69, and it was pretty, unproductive in the sense of like there's not much excitement, and something like this, there was nothing even attached to him. And so, but this statute of limitations was then used as an excuse. They expanded the time that people could report into the Diocese of Rochester. And then the final excuse is that the report actually has not been issued yet.
Right.
Yet all the information that they have has been gathered. And when I called in a couple of years ago to ask about this, I said, well, what are you going to do? Like, how would you know? He said, oh, they'll contact us if there's any questions, or if there's a particular person, because obviously Fulton Sheen was a big name. I said, but there was no inclination of, well, we're eager to get this resolved as well. We're going to be asking, what do you have to say about Bishop Sheen and this, his tenure here? I mean, they could easily zero in and figure that out.
Yeah. They're just sitting there playing passive and waiting for, Letitia James to turn around and say, okay, it's fine, he's cleared. I'm like, okay, really? So we submit the cause for sainthood, or one of the avenues to do that in the church, to a secular attorney general, who, by the way, hates the church. That just seems like an odd way to go.
It is. Like you said, it sets a very dangerous precedent, and it also casts doubt in the minds of Catholics as far as the whole process. Like, well, if there's a question here, well, what about so-and-so here? And a more recent thing, are we going to start questioning John Paul II's canonization? Well, look, McCarrick was, was a cardinal underneath it. I mean, you could start going down a rabbit hole, and you can say, well, what about all these other times where we didn't have thorough investigations of these saints that we're presuming are saints, like these stallions of the church? But had we had a modern investigation, we probably would have found that there was maybe something how do we really know? Once you start that question of doubt, it's like Lucifer, Satan in the garden. Did God say? And all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, well, it does kind of seem like this. And next thing you know, we're in a massive disaster like we had today. So that's actually what inspired me to really pick this torch up again, and make this a big issue, because we need to also reestablish faith in the church and the process, and in Fulton Sheen. It's raising doubts in a man that had the greatest impact of any Catholic American in history.
Sure. Absolutely, he understood the power of the media, and did. You're looking at the son of a man he converted, or helped to convert. Let me play devil's advocate for just a moment, in case people are watching this who goes out to more than just Catholics. Is there anything legitimate about waiting if a question arises? Is there anything legitimate saying, well, maybe we should investigate this more? That's certainly what they're proposing to be the case. That's what Bishop Matano is proposing is the case. We don't want any air of dubious anything around if they're, the big celebration of being, upped to blessed. Or is this the case that, well, those questions have already been answered, so let's move on? We don't
Right.
need the New York State Attorney General to come in and give her seal of approval to a church process which already asked all these questions a lot more thoroughly than she probably could. So is it legitimate to say, in this case, is it legitimate for Matano and Supich and Dolan to say, oh, we really should put this on pause, pump the brakes, or is something else at play, in your opinion?
Well, from a very legalistic perspective, sure, you could say it's legitimate. We have not seen the report. On the other hand, with the diocese, who is, whether they want to admit it or not, really are the gatekeepers of this entire delay, and really having a date set tomorrow if they wanted, they probably could make a phone call and change all of this. The fact that and knowing that there's been a huge, as we would, theologically say, the cult of Sheen has been so strong, and the impact that this man's going to have by giving attention to Blessed, that they wouldn't make a call and simply say, we understand your report's going on. As you know, we're concerned about this person. Tell us, was there anything that came up? They could have done any level of investigation, inquiry into that, and at least issued a statement to say, look, this is what we have learned.
Yeah. And
at that point, at least it shows that there's, I think, some honesty in the way that they're approaching this, because it's to just write this off and gaslight like this thing doesn't have any importance or impact on the Catholic Church in America. Yeah. I think, it raises even greater doubt. So yeah, on a very strict level, you could say it's legitimate because we haven't seen the report, but this is a huge name. It would have come out, and you think the secular world would be the first to say, oh yeah, check this out, the church missed this on this guy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's not like they don't know anything. They, meaning the New York State Attorney General's office. It's not like they don't know anything until they issue the report. The report is based on all of the evidence and information and whatever they have, collected over these years. And if they had information on Bishop Sheen, first of all, as you rightly point out, the Diocese of Rochester, in the person of Bishop Matano, should be on the phone saying, hey, we're excited to get this thing going. Can you tell us what you know? Because there's everything we know. We have done all of this and we have found nothing, zero. Have you found something we haven't? Because we want to go. We want to get this moving. But there is no impetus for doing that. And, I think the part of faithful Catholics, many of whom, know and love Bishop Sheen, I think the impetus on the part of Catholics is to say, so let me get this right, bishops. You all lie and take money from the faithful Catholics to pay billions of dollars in sex abuse settlements and hundreds of millions of dollars in legal bills, and you lie and cover all that up and everything else, and you're very, very, very proactive when it comes to that. But when it comes to being proactive about the cause of perhaps the most famous Catholic in American history, you just sort of sit on your hands and go, oh, well, we got to wait for the New York Attorney General. It does seem strikingly weird.
It does. I don't know. I'm not involved in these conversations, but I do know that Bishop Tilka did speak to the Holy See last fall. Mm-hmm. It's not a secret. And essentially what came out of that was he mentioned the cause, or the beatification in particular. And of course they said, well, we're still interested, and, we're watching it carefully, whatever. And that it kind of left on a positive note. However, for me, it's like a positive note would be something concrete. Like, we're looking to have this resolved by the end of the year. This thing can be resolved.
Sure.
It doesn't. This is not rocket science, and the fact that it's nobody wants to deal with this in the Diocese of Rochester.
Yeah.
I know calls that have gone in, and it's been almost kind of a curt response. Like, all we want to know is what's going on with this man that is one of the Catholic Church's greatest figures in the 20th century,
and raised a little boy from the dead.
Exactly, and we're just business as usual.
Yeah,
and
it's
so, it goes back to really what Sheen said back in '72. It's a quote we all Sheen fans and devotees know who's going to save the church.
Yep.
It's not going to be us bishops, priests, or religious, but it's going to be you, the people. You have the eyes, the minds, the ears to save the church. Now, this is an archbishop saying this. So it was like, is he anti-clergy? No, because he saw, I mean, this man was so prophetic, but he saw, I think, the crisis that was coming already in his time, what was going on, but what was coming, and this rise of the role that you're playing, I'm trying to play, and others in this unique period of history. I mean, extraordinarily unique period of history.
Yeah,
and we have a right to, to get to the bottom of this and really get our saint.
Yeah, I mean, the saints belong to the church, which belongs to Christ. They do not belong to the bishops. The bishops are ministers and instruments and stewards of the process, but they are not supposed to be thwarting the process and then not being held accountable for it and being allowed to get away with, essentially frustrating the cause. The saints are for the people. For the good of the church, to emulate them and follow them and imitate their virtues, which are of course imitating Christ, and to constantly frustrate this process. I mean, we know many of the people who followed Church Militant back in the day know that Cardinal Dolan, one of the steps involved in the process was to get the body of Bishop Sheen, which was buried under the crypt of St. Patrick's Cathedral, and have it removed and taken to Peoria, Illinois. We covered that extensively. And Cardinal Dolan did everything in his power to prevent that from happening, even down to straight up lying, saying that the Archdiocese of New York had never agreed to that. The Archdiocese of New York had agreed to that, and then he became the Archbishop, Cardinal Archbishop, and was like, oh, no, that's not what we said. He spent $1 million on legal fees, trying to prevent Joan Cunningham, who was the great niece of Bishop Sheen and the next in line as far as being the kin, to prevent her from moving the body. $1 million of Catholics' money to prevent a step necessary. And then when he finally, I think it was 5-0, I think he lost 5 cases for 5 times in court. And when it was finally done, then, the body is taken out, spirited away. He had this sweet little old lady, we were there, this sweet little old lady get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to black Manhattan, completely dark, and get there, and then the body spirited away real quickly. Nothing. He didn't even show up. Cardinal Dolan wasn't even there at the disinterment of, and he lives in the same building, where it happened. I mean, he's in the rectory, but there's a tunnel that gets to the sacristy and where the body was out into the sanctuary. So Cardinal Dolan did everything in his power, spent all kinds of money to prevent the canonization from moving forward. And then when he finally lost in the civil courts, he then shifts over to the canon law process of it and the cause of sainthood. He was one of the ones with Supich that signed the letter or suggested, was behind the scenes working with Bishop Matano to prevent the canonization from happening. I mean, the question needs to be asked. It has to be asked and answered. Why does the U.S. hierarchy so diametrically oppose the canonization of Bishop Sheen? What's going on? I'm just curious on your opinion on that.
That's a loaded question. When you think of what Sheen stood for, there's a few things I think at play there. You could say on one level, there is, Peoria did what the Archdiocese of New York didn't do. They took the reins, they put all the money, they raised it, and they did all the canonical processes of the priest that was ordained in their diocese. When the Archdiocese of New York could easily have picked that up and this thing probably would be resolved by long before now. And that didn't happen. And so I think when Peoria, this rift between the bishops, then carried into the family, like you said, of Joan Cunningham, and then she fought for the body of Fulton Sheen, and then New York loses money, and they lose all the cases, and then Bishop Sheen goes, I think there's got to be some kind of angst and hard feelings that's going to be there, because, there wasn't one victory for the Archdiocese of New York. But then you also have the deeper question of what does Sheen stand for? And this is the question, what does the devil not want? Fulton Sheen's, in my own life, and having degrees in theology and all of these things, no one has impacted my life like Fulton Sheen.
Yep.
No one. I listened to him on one retreat, and after the first 10 minutes, I was completely sold to this man in this retreat that I listened from the 70s, but it was remastered, so it felt like he was in my car. So these old cassette tapes, and next thing you know, but my life was forever changed. It made me start praying the daily holy hour. Talk about the reignition of my faith and all aspects of my interior life. And then this is a retreat for priests that I was listening to, because I was still discerning in my own vocation. And I was like, oh my gosh, this message, if every priest heard this and lived this, we would see the greatest, not just a reform, but a revitalization of the priesthood that we've ever seen. And you combine it with that this man is like the modern day St. Thomas Aquinas, who studied everything modern at the same time. So he's like the Summa of Aquinas and the Summa of all things of what the world's thinking. And then in one man, and he puts it in 60 plus books and all these television shows. I mean, what was God's purpose for him? If when we pause and look at that, it's like, oh my gosh, if we drew attention to this man right now in the greatest cultural crisis, where we've just surrendered to everything he prophesied, he saw the world going toward Marxism, communism. He saw America going to this. It's like this guy also held the answers for the priesthood, the laity, you name it, intellectual, return to intelligence. So it doesn't surprise me that what he experienced in his own life, being literally canceled, like the patron of cancel culture would be Fulton Sheen by Cardinal Spellman, and then now all these battles all along the way till now, it's like it's the revenge, like that Montezuma's revenge curse is now like with Spellman and Sheen.
Yeah, it is. It's a very, very sad state of affairs with this, which is why the faithful have to keep pounding on it. It is. I don't want to get you in trouble with the hierarchy perhaps any more than you might be, but they already hate our guts. So I feel confident in saying the revitalization of the faith is the last thing the U.S. hierarchy wants to see. And since Bishop Sheen would be the patron saint of that, if he, when his cause is finally done, whether they're alive or dead in the process, that's the last thing these men would want to see. They've spent 50 years trying to destroy the faith, whether consciously or not. The last thing they want to see is a revitalization of it, and certainly the priesthood, because of how lousy they would look by comparison. There, I said it. You don't have to nod your head and agree. I know you still probably have to deal with bishops, but...
Yeah, I just to interject for a second. I understand. These are the times in which we live, and I pray for our bishops and cardinals because, who knows? I don't know exactly what they're thinking. I'm basing things off of what we've seen and what we've learned, and at the same time, I'd be ecstatic if Bishop Matano came out the hero. This is not about me. It's not about the Diocese of Peoria, the Diocese of Rochester. It's like you said, the saints belong to the church,
right?
And if he turned around and says, for whatever reason, says like next week, okay, he makes a call and resolves this. Wonderful. You've done the church an immense service, and that's what I care about. I want to move forward.
Right.
And we need this. We need Blessed Sheen and then Saint Sheen more than ever. So, I pray for them, and I'm grateful for I'm very grateful for what Peoria did. I mean, and they were they had to fight the battle the whole way.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that now the laity, in conjunction with other bishops who are very amenable to this cause and movement, we could join the forces in our prayers and as well as in our efforts now to really make a collective voice, give the Vox Populi some strength with Sheen. Look, the church will at least hear it. If we do one-on-ones and smaller things, it's not. There's just too much going on. There's too much battles within the church, as we know.
Yeah.
And this will get buried.
Yeah, these are the days we're in right now. Last question, the softball question. Doctor, please tell people how they can get in touch with you and your movement. Where do they go?
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Well, you can go to fultonsheenmovement.com. And what we're doing is we're actually launching, it's already launched, a worldwide petition to draw people, their attention to this cause, to unpause the cause for Sheen. We want to set the date for the new, for the Mass. And that's all this is about, is to bring people together from all over the world, and they already are. But I'm hopeful your listeners, your viewers will, spend 15 seconds and just go to the site, fultonsheenmovement.com. There's a petition, sign it, and we're going to make that voice very large. And hopefully, as the numbers keep growing with that, we will be presenting it to the bishops, to Bishop Matano, ultimately the Holy See. We'll see where this goes, but this is something where we want to go all the way, and we want to move fast while we have very little time, in my opinion, to do a lot in the world, because this, as Sheen says, we're at the end of an era, and I think that this movement is going to be critical. So, and giving Sheen to the church as our general, and that's kind of how I see that for our priests, our bishops, the laity. So FultonSheenMovement.com, fill out the petition, share it with everybody you know, everywhere, and let's get to hundreds of thousands of signatures fast.
Absolutely. Dr. Peter Howard, thank you very much for your faithfulness to the church, your fidelity to Bishop Sheen and the cause for sainthood, and giving us the time to come on and enlighten us as where things stand right now. It's much appreciated. We'll have you back on as things advance.
Great. Thank you, Michael. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. All right, everybody, that will wrap that up. As Dr. Peter Howard said, unpause the cause. Go to the site, sign up, and and start talking about this with your friends, and go become more familiar with Bishop Sheen. Again, like we said at the very beginning, the studio that we're in right here is named after Bishop Sheen, because we have such an affinity and devotion to him, his work, and his cause. God love you. I'm Michael Voris.